Okay, so what we're going to do this morning is I'm going to present the background and some of the key aspects and highlights of a paper that I co-wrote with Professor Tamara Wright. And I'll introduce how that pairing happened in the beginning. But this was for the fifth yahrzeit of Rabbi Sachs. As I mentioned in the intro to my book, and when we did the book launch, Rabbi Sachs had a tremendous impact on my life. He was somebody who, despite me not having a personal relationship with, I feel like I had a personal relationship with him through all of his writings and teachings, and it really, he has influenced me, probably one of the biggest influences on my thinking and being as a, not just as a rabbi, not just as a psychologist, but just as a person. And as we commemorate the fifth yahrzeit, it's as I'm going next a few weeks, we're going to Israel as part of the Rabbi Sachs legacy, part of the third cohort, and seeing what's happening and what's being done in memory from his lead because of him is really inspirational, but it's also sad because he should still be here and he should be doing it. But through the legacy that he left, his students and grand students and just people he's influenced are trying to take it to the next level. And this edition of Tradition that just came out, we have a copy in the Beis Medrash. You can feel free to look at our articles. I'm just going to talk about my article, but there are articles written by thought leaders and educational leaders and community leaders who were influenced by Rabbi Sachs. I highly recommend everyone gets their hand on a copy and read some of the analysis. So we're going to do an ambitious goal. We may not get through all of it, we'll see. But I'm going to introduce to you where this pairing of myself and Professor Tamara Wright came from, and then to overview the key aspects of the article, which is really about resilience. And we're trying to tackle how Rabbi Sachs thought about the concept of resilience through my lens is psychology, her lens is philosophy, and we blended the two hopefully seamlessly within the article. And what we came out with their core themes, both within philosophy and psychology, that influenced Rabbi Sachs' thinking. And really what he did, he didn't say it always explicitly, but if you read carefully, he was able to create through some of his this topic of resilience, you see some of the main issues that Rabbi Sachs thought about, spoke about, wrote about, all come, one of the big ideas in Rabbi Sachs all come through when we think about resilience. So we're going to talk about resilience, we're going to talk about cognitive flexibility, hope, agency, the concept of moving from an I society to a we society, and then we'll bring it all together by talking about how this relates to connecting to God, because as we go through the conversation, you'll have to see Rabbi Sachs is playing with a lot of different big picture themes. Rabbi Sachs liked to speak about humans and agency and our ability to take responsibility, and finding where God fits into that picture is going to be an essential last piece that we will conclude with. So, where did this pairing of myself and Professor Tamara Wright come from? So Professor Tamara Wright lives in England. She was a student of Rabbi Sachs, and she is a scholar of modern Jewish philosophy. So she wrote or edited in this book that was put out in 2013 in honor of Rabbi Sachs retiring from the chief rabbinate. It's called Radical Responsibility. It's a collection of essays. She was one of the three editors of the book. And in the afterword to the book, and I mentioned this at the book launch last month, in the afterword to the book, Professor Wright says that Rabbi Sachs had this vision of combining the best practices and ideas from modern psychology, including positive psychology and cognitive behavior therapy, to blend those with Jewish concepts of Musar, to create what she called a new Musar, what he identified as a new Musar. He never wrote about this explicitly, but we'll see it's going to be embedded in a lot of his works. And a new Musar is, by blending the best practices of psychology and Torah, we can help create lasting change within people, individuals, as well as society and cultures. When I read this, it spoke deeply to me because I'm somebody who researches and thinks a lot about positive psychology, and I'm trained as a cognitive behavior therapist, and I'm trained as a rabbi. So this really was something that brought together all of my interests and goals. And when I read it, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But 10 years ago when I read it, I didn't know who she was. I didn't really have any framework or standard to be able to move forward with this. And then Luckily enough, through some siyata d'shmaya, as they say, I was taking a class. I was going for a master's in Jewish philosophy at Bernard Revel Graduate School, and she was a adjunct teacher or a visiting professor for a summer where she taught modern Jewish philosophy. And I had to take the class, and I took the class, and I was very excited. She had no idea who I was, but I knew who she was from this article. I was privileged to be her student that semester. And now she's a Jewish philosopher who has a very strong interest in positive psychology. So it was a good pairing because I spoke to her about psychology and she spoke to me about philosophy. And then when she was approached by tradition to write this article for about Rabbi Sachs, she came to me and said, let's connect all of the ideas that we've been talking about over the past few years about creating this this connection between psychology, philosophy, and Rabbi Sachs's thought, and that's how this chapter was created. So you're not going to get all of the background of all the details of all the thought processes of how it was developed over time, but it took time to think. It was like a chavrusa. We had to sit and we thought, and we Zoom sessioned, and we had to brainstorm exactly how we wanted to conceptualize this. We didn't really fully get to the end. It's not like we started, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to go do it. We actually developed it through our thinking, learning, and researching and writing. But we started with the concept of resilience. Rabbi Sachs writes about resilience, says the great human beings are not those who never fail, they are those who survive failure, who keep on going, who refuse to be defeated, who never give up or give in. They keep trying, they learn from every mistake, they treat failure as a learning experience, and from every refusal to be defeated, they become stronger, wiser, and more determined. And just for context, you have this on your page in front of you, and it's also on the slide. So you can follow along if you're want to read it closer. Rabbi Sachs here, even though he doesn't use the language, is really describing what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. And that is, when it comes to going through struggles, the struggles themselves are things that, with the right perspective, we can learn from and we can grow from. And Rabbi Sachs is saying that that's an essential aspect of being human. And he also then builds it into Jewish history. And I hope this works. Might not, but let's try this. We're going to make this a multimedia presentation. If not, I have the words on the paper in front of you. But this is from a lecture he gave at Yeshiva University around 10 years ago to students called The 7 Principles of Inner Happiness. Let's see if this works. Okay? Everybody listen carefully and hope for the best.
Rabbi Sachs is a world-renowned scholar.
Okay, I was hoping it would go into the speakers, but it is not.
So, rule 4 in life.
You can't hear this, right?
I can't hear. Rabbi Sachs is a world-renowned feeling outside the room. And you have to focus on the you or on the we. It's not on the I. Focus on the I and you will recapitulate the life of Goliath. And find that however much you have, you'll miss the most important thing, which is...
Okay, our AV is not working. Testing. Microphone's not on. Okay, all right, so we'll just read it inside. So if you look here, he writes here 7 principles of inner happiness. Principle 6 says coping with adversity. You will, chas v'shalom, but it's likely to happen. You will find there are times in your life when things do not go as you expected, when you suffer some kind of adversity. Bad things happen to good people. The question is, how do you deal with those bad things? I want you to listen very carefully to this. The way to deal with adversity is to treat it the way Jacob treated the angel. Lo ashalachecha ki imberachtani. I will not let you go until you bless me. Somehow, the Jewish people learn not merely to survive catastrophe, but to grow through it. If you think about it, Chorban Bayis Rishon, the destruction of the first temple, brought about the renewal of Torah and the lives of the Jewish people as symbolized by Ezra and Nehemiah. Chorban Bayis Sheni, the destruction of the second temple, brought about the great writing down of the extraordinary literature of Torah Shabbal Peh, Medrash, Mishnah, Gemara. The Crusades led to the Hasidei Ashkenaz. The Spanish expulsion led to the mystics of Sfat. Even the Holocaust led a mere 3 years later to the declaration of independence of the State of Israel. None of this answers the philosophical question of tzaddik v'ralo, why bad things happen to good people, but it does explain the way Jews responded to catastrophe. Lo ashalachecha ki im berachtani. I will not let you go, catastrophe, I will not let you go until you bless me, until we find something good to come about from this. If you hang in there, if you refuse to let go and carry on until you have turned that crisis into some new strength, new sense of purpose, new dedication, new energy, then you will find you can survive the worst catastrophes and grow stronger thereby. Anyone who has this attribute will look back on life and see the moments that seemed really tough at the time turned in retrospect to be the most important events in your life. So Rabbi Sachs here is saying something that perhaps we've experienced, perhaps we've struggled with, but to the extent that we can take the bad, to take the challenges, to take the struggles, and transform them into something that we can grow from, that's a principle not just of personal success, but what he's doing is bigger than that. He's saying this is national success. This is the secret to the Jewish people. Anytime anything bad has ever happened, we have taken it to transform it into something that is powerful and lasting for long. So that is the concept of resilience. Now the question is, what are the key components, the ingredients to resilience? How do we get to this super strength? At one point he called it super resilience. How do we get to the super strength of this ability to bounce back, to learn from failure, to grow, and to actually do something transformative when something bad happens? So if you look in the resilience literature, you'll notice that it's very hard to pin down. There's a book by George Bonanno called The End of Trauma, and in it he has a whole page where he surveys all of the literature on what are the key ingredients to resilience. And he's actually doing it somewhat facetiously, because he lists around 40 different things that if you study the literature, this is what resilience, if these are the ingredients to resilience. If you have optimism, if you have hope, we're going to see some of that. If you have flexibility, if you're able, and it goes down 40 different things. And his point is that when you have 40 different things, that means that we don't really know what the thing is. Okay, so there's lots of different possibilities, and we haven't really pinned down what the key ingredients to resilience are. But if you analyze and you try, there might be some more key things. So knowing that this isn't the only picture of resilience, what we're going to be focusing on is 3 aspects of resilience that are found in Rabbi Sachs' thought, not just about resilience, but as we're going to show at the end, I think form the core components of what he thought resilience was about. And that goes to part 2 on the second page, cognitive flexibility. And here is where we're bringing in a key aspect of that new Musar, the combination of psychology with Torah to help people flourish, cognitive flexibility. So this is a fascinating analysis of Yosef. This is found in his commentary on the Bible, in Judaism's life-changing ideas. And Rabbi Sachs, what he does here is something that is pretty fascinating. He says that there are 3. Rabbi Sachs wasn't a fan of Freud. We're not going to get into the details of that, but part of it is we'll see, relates to Freud's tragic view of human nature. Rabbi Sachs did not think that we should view human nature as tragic. Instead, he wanted to view human nature as something as hopeful. And here's where he looked to 3 different psychologists in order to demonstrate the key aspects of this hopeful view of psychology, of human nature. First one is Viktor Frankl. And this is also, it's on the PowerPoint, but it's also taken from the page in front of you. He says, by contrast, meaning in contrast to Freud, 3 of the most significant post-war psychotherapists were not merely Jewish by birth, but profoundly Jewish in their approach to the human soul. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz, developed on the basis of his experience there an approach he called logotherapy, based on man's search for meaning. Though the Nazis took away almost every vestige of humanity from those who they consigned to the death factories, Frankl argued that there was one thing they can never take away from their prisoners, the freedom to decide how to respond. Okay, so that was first psychotherapist who influenced Rabbi Sachs. The second, this is Aaron Beck, was one of the founders of what is widely regarded as the most effective forms of psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. Among patients suffering from depression, he found that their feelings were often linked to highly negative thoughts about themselves, the world, and the future. By getting them to think more realistically, he found that their mood tended to improve. Third psychologist, Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology, which aims not to just treat depression, but actively to promote what he calls authentic happiness and learned optimism. Depression, Seligman argued, is often linked to pessimism, which comes from interpreting events in a particular kind of way that he calls learned helplessness. Pessimists tend to see misfortune as permanent, it's always like this, personal, it's my fault, and pervasive, I always get things wrong. This leaves them feeling that the bad they suffer is inevitable and beyond their control. Optimists look at things differently. For them, negative events are temporary, the results of outside factors and exceptions rather than the rule. So within limits, you can unlearn pessimism, and the result is greater happiness, health, and success. Okay, so Rabbi Sachs is looking to Frankl, to Beck, and to Seligman, and here's how he links all three of these thinkers together. What links all three thinkers is their belief that, 1, there is always more than one possible interpretation of what happens to us. 2, we can choose between different interpretations. And 3, the way we think shapes the way we feel. And this is key aspects to helping us become resilient, to help us live flourishing lives. And Rabbi Sachs ties these three to Chabad thought. Okay? This gives all three a marked resemblance to a particular kind of Jewish thought, namely Chabad Chassidut, as developed by the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, or Shner Zalman of Liadi. Unlike the other Hasidic movements which emphasize the emotional life, Chabad Hasidism focused on the power of intellect to shape emotion. It was in this way an anticipation of cognitive behavioral therapy. That might be an oversell on some level, but there is aspects at the core of the ability to change your thinking, to change the way you feel. That's Frankl, that's Seligman, that's Beck, and Rabbi Sachs, in fashion that he usually does, then tells you that's exactly what Yosef was in Egypt. He was able to reframe, he was able to rethink, he was able to look at the situation in a different way to avoid becoming depressed in the depth of despair, and was able to then succeed and become successful in Egypt, and then reunite with his family, etc. So the first aspect of being resilient is being able to be flexible with your thoughts, to see a situation from multiple perspectives, and to try to find the one perspective that's going to help you move forward, succeed, keep going, and build. Part 3 is going to give us the next ingredient, which is a cousin of cognitive flexibility. This was essential to Rabbi Sachs, this was essential to his thought, and that is hope. Rabbi Sachs writes in Radical Then, Radical Now, which is the original, this is like Harry Potter, right? So Harry Potter in England was called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and in America it's called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So, Lahavdil, Rabbi Sachs's book, Radical Then, Radical Now, is what it's called in England, and in America it's called A Letter in the Scroll. Okay, so A Letter in the Scroll is one of his popular books. Originally in England it was called Radical Then, Radical Now. So in Radical Then, Radical Now, Rabbi Sachs writes as follows. The very fact of national distress was accompanied by a promise and a hope. If Jews returned to God, God would return to them. Jewish suffering had a coherent inner logic. It confirmed the destiny of this singular people, unlike others, outside the norms of history, often wayward and severely punished for its backslidings, yet part of a drama whose final act is homecoming. Judaism is the systematic rejection of tragedy in the name of hope. Right? And that's the key piece. And this is Rabbi Sachs' general way of speaking, which makes him so fascinating, is that he takes an idea that you might think is like a teeny small minor thing, and he makes it the biggest deal in the world, and that last line does this. Judaism is the systematic rejection of tragedy in the name of hope. And what I'm going to try to be resilient for a second, but it's going to require your slight patience. I'm going to see if there's just a button I can push that turns the sound on. If yes, I'm going to show you this video. It may not be.
Something that's unplugged there. We see like cords with no plug on the floor.
No, that's not it.
No, but it's the strip on.
Yeah, no, that shouldn't be the microphone. I'll plug this, and I don't think this is it either, but we'll try. We're just going to give me 10 seconds.
Yeah, don't try. Yeah.
just pushing levers up and hoping for the best.
That's that. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to show you a brief video here. This is Rabbi Sachs about Hanukkah. So it's in Yana D'Yoma coming up. Hanukkah, here we go. Let's see if this would be even better if it comes through the speakers. If not, I'll put my microphone by my speakers.
One of the key phrases of our time is the clash of civilizations. And Hanukkah is about one of the first great clashes of civilizations between the Greeks and Jews of antiquity, between Athens and Jerusalem. The ancient Greeks produced one of the most remarkable civilizations of all time. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, historians like Herodotus and Thucydides, dramatists like Sophocles and Aeschylus. They produced art and architecture of a beauty that has never been surpassed. Yet in the 2nd century before Common Era, they were defeated by a group of Jewish fighters known as the Maccabees. And from then on, Greece, as a world power, went into rapid decline, while the tiny Jewish people survived every exile and every persecution, and are still alive and well today. What was the difference? The Greeks, who didn't believe in a single loving God, gave the world the concept of tragedy. We strive, we struggle, at times we achieve greatness, but life on this view has no ultimate purpose. The universe neither knows nor cares that we exist. Ancient Israel gave the world the idea of hope. We are here because God created us in love, and through love we discover the meaning and purpose of life. Tragic cultures eventually disintegrate and die. Lacking any sense of ultimate meaning, they lose the moral beliefs and habits on which continuity depends. They sacrifice happiness for pleasure. They sell the future for the sake of the present. They lose the passion and energy that brought them greatness in the first place. That's what happened to ancient Greece. Judaism and its culture of hope survived. And the Hanukkah lights are the symbol of that survival, of Judaism's refusal to jettison its values for the glamour and prestige of a secular culture then or now. A candle of hope may seem a small thing, but on it, the very survival of a civilization may depend.
Okay. If you are lost, don't worry.
No, I said, what a
What a
loss.
loss. Oh,
What a
I thought you said you're
loss
lost.
to lose him.
Yes, that's true. Okay. If you are lost anyway, though, I forgot to mention what he just said is on the sheet. You can see it, and that's one of the benefits of the Rabbi Sachs Legacy website. They have all of his material not just up, but even videos are all transcribed, so you can search them, you can find them. There's quotes, etc. So Rabbi Sachs here makes again the whole story of Hanukkah as a clash of civilizations, and that the Jews believed in hope, while the Greeks believed in tragedy. Again, perhaps an oversimplification on some level, but at the core, a lot of that sticks. And if you look at source number 7, here's a slightly different formulation of the same idea in his book, The Great Partnership, which talks about science, religion, and meaning. So Rabbi Sachs writes, monotheism, by giving life a meaning, redeemed it from tragedy. The Greeks understood tragedy better than any other civilization before or since. Ancient Israel, though it suffered much, had no sense of tragedy. It did not even have a word for it. Monotheism is the principal defeat of tragedy in the name of hope. A world without religious faith is a world without sustainable grounds for hope. It may have optimism, but that is something else and something shallower altogether. Because Rabbi Sachs did just here, what he did right now is say that hope is the big aspect of Judaism that helps it continue, in contrast to Greeks who believed in tragedy. There's no hope. But at the end, he actually set us a clue as to how we need to now go to the next step and analyze his thinking. Because what in the world is he saying here at the end? It may have optimism, but that is something else, something shallower altogether. Because Rabbi Sachs here is leading us in a direction where he says in other places, we're gonna delve into this, that there's a fundamental distinction between hope and optimism. And Rabbi Sachs, even though in the previous essay where he quoted Martin Seligman, talked about learned optimism and the importance of optimism, in other writings, Rabbi Sachs is going to take optimism and he's basically going to say it has no value to it. Optimism has no value to it. Hope is what's important. So what's the difference between optimism and hope? So if you look here in source number 8, Rabbi Sachs in the same book writes, hope is not costless in the way that optimism is. It carries with it a considerable price. Those who hope refuse to be comforted, while the hoped-for outcome is not yet reached. Given their history of suffering, Jews were rarely optimists, but they never gave up hope. That is why when the prophets saw evil in the world, they refused to be comforted. Because Rabbi Sachs is giving us another little clue here. Optimism is costless. There's no cost to be optimistic. What does that mean, there's no cost to be optimistic? Hope is difficult. Optimism is easy. No cost to it. So what's he saying here? So look at the next source. This is from The Dignity of Difference. One of my goals in this was to give you a little bit of a taste for many of his books. So The Great Partnership is about science and religion. The Dignity of Difference he wrote after 9/11 to talk about how different societies and different religions can live together despite their differences, and that's his argument for that. So in The Dignity of Difference he writes, one of the most important distinctions I've learned in the course of reflection on Jewish history is the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the faith that together we can make things better. Optimism is a passive virtue, hope an active one. It takes no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to have hope. Okay, so here this is an important clue. Rabbi Sachs is saying is that optimism is passive. Things are going to get better. Great. I'm going to sit and watch TV. I'm going to sit and scroll on my phone. I'm going to sit and do nothing. And I believe things will get better. Rabbi Sachs, that's pointless, useless, irrelevant. What is hope? Hope is that things are going to get better, but why? Because I'm going to do something about it. Agency, which leads us to part 4. The next clue in developing resilience and putting the hope piece together is the concept of agency. And agency was a key theme in Rabbi Sachs's thought. Here's just one excerpt from it, from Future Tense. Different book, Rabbi Sachs talks about Jews, Judaism, and Israel in the 21st century. So he writes, every ritual, every command, every syllable of the Jewish story is a protest against escapism, resignation, and the blind acceptance of fate. Everything we do is because we are making a mark. We are being active. We are trying to make a difference. Judaism, the religion of the free God, is a religion of freedom. Jewish faith is written in the future tense. It is a belief in a future that is not yet but could be if we heed God's calls, obey His will, and act together as a covenantal community. The name of the Jewish future is hope. So here Rabbi Sachs is saying it's because hope is there, but hope is because we have agency. We need to do something about it. It can't just be something passive. But there's one, and we're going to build up the agency at the end as we bring things together. But there's one other key piece. If you read it carefully, let's see if you can figure it out. Both in source number, the last source, number 10, and in source number 9, there was a key word that led us to realize that the answer to why Rabbi, so again, going back to my thought process with Professor Wright, we're thinking, why is Rabbi Sachs against optimism? Optimism, if you read the psychological literature, optimism also has value. Hope has value, but optimism has value. Just thinking things are going to get better, even without agency, has value. So why is Rabbi Sachs pushing down optimism when it also could potentially have value? So we're thinking, it was a rhetorical question, but please, Ben or Malka, which one? No. Right, so the answer that originally we came to was that it's not that Rabbi Sachs automatically has something against optimism. Again, we saw him say, Seligman talks about optimism. Optimism could be good for you. You're changing your perspective. But Rabbi Sachs, as our original thought was, Rabbi Sachs was so intent on focusing on agency that he had to put down optimism almost as a rhetorical device. I don't want people to think that things are just going to get better and they become passive. There's a danger when you think things are going to become better that you don't do anything about it. And because Rabbi Sachs, a key aspect of his philosophy is that Judaism is about doing, agency, action. It's not that the Beis HaMikdash is just going to magically fall down and everything's going to be saved. If you want to build a better society, we need to do something about it. But then we realized that there was another key piece that, again, if you read it quickly and you just focus on the agency, you might come to a problem. And that, if you just think about it, what's the problem of thinking that agency, I can do things, I will make things better. I can do it. What's the problem? Well, the problem is that I have limitations. How am I supposed to change the world? I'm just one individual. And Rabbi Sachs believed in the power of the individual, that is for sure. But if you read what Rabbi Sachs said carefully, again, both in source number 9 and in number 10, there is a key word that comes up in both of them that is essential to understanding the missing component here. And that is together. Together. Rabbi Sachs believed in agency, but when we work together to make change, individuals can only have such an impact. But if we work together, not just as a Jewish community, but as a world community, then things can get better. So the next piece of figuring out resilience, moving from cognitive flexibility, yes, you have to be able to think about different things in different ways and try to change your perspective. Yes, you need to have hope. But hope isn't just a passive virtue, it's an active one because you need to have agency. Yes, you need to take agency, you need to do things, you need to be active. But you can't just do it together. You have to figure out, you can't just do it yourself, you have to figure out how to do it together. And this was a key theme of Rabbi Sachs's thought throughout his life, but in the end of his life, towards you'll see his TED Talk in a second, and his book Morality is where he hyper-focused on the concept of moving from an I society to a we society. So I want to show you a brief excerpt from his TED Talk. Again, you can watch this whole thing on your own. We're just going to watch a short piece of it.
Perhaps the most simple way into a culture and into an age is to ask, what do people worship? People have worshipped so many different things, the sun, the stars, the storm. Some people worship many gods, some one, some none. In the 19th and 20th centuries, people worshipped the nation, the Aryan race, the communist state. What do we worship? I think future anthropologists will take a look at the books we read on self-help, self-realization, self-esteem. They look at the way we talk about morality as being true to oneself, the way we talk about politics as a matter of individual rights. And they'll look at this wonderful new religious ritual we have created. You know the one? Called the selfie. And I think they'll conclude that what we worship in our time is the self, the me, the I. And this is great. It's liberating, it's empowering, it's wonderful. But don't forget that biologically we're social animals. We spent most of our evolutionary history in small groups. We need those face-to-face interactions where we learn the choreography of altruism and where we create those spiritual goods like friendship and trust and loyalty and love that redeem our solitude. When we have too much of the I and too little of the we can find ourselves vulnerable, fearful, and alone. It was no accident that Sherry Turkle of MIT called the book she wrote on the impact of social media Alone Together. So I think the simplest way of safeguarding the future you is to strengthen the future us in 3 dimensions. The us of...
Okay, you'll have to see those 3 dimensions on your own. But here Rabbi Sachs is emphasizing the concept of moving from I to we. And then I'm going to show you one more clip. This is from once COVID hit, so they had TED did a symposium. They invited some of their speakers to go on Zoom calls to talk about what they were experiencing during the pandemic. So they interviewed Rabbi Sachs, and pay attention to how he's now going to take some of the themes that we spoke about and how he deals with hope, optimism, the pandemic, and the us and the we in his response to the following question. I think.
So after the 1918 flu epidemic, the world did change, but not sure for the better. Think of the rise of fascist ideologies. Why should we be optimistic that the present disruption is leading us to a better place?
Chris, I have to make a distinction which is incredibly important between optimism and hope. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the belief that if we work hard enough together, we can make things better. It needs no courage, any as it naivety to be an optimist, but it needs sometimes a great deal of courage to have hope. I try to bring a message of hope, not of optimism. We know that World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars, and it didn't end all war. We know that the flu epidemic, which may have taken between 20 and 50 million lives, did not suddenly create a we society. We know all the bad things that happened, the Great Crash, the 30s depression, and so on. And in the end, the explosion of evil that was World War II. So I'm not being optimistic here. There could be another road that people will go down. A nationalist road, which sees the rise of far-right parties in Europe and the breakup of the European Union, further tensions between the United States and China. Heaven alone knows what Russia will do in all this mix. There are horrendous possibilities. That's why we need to work very hard together to make sure that we take the possible good benefits out of this. Number one, the understanding that the whole of humanity has been brought to its knees by one tiny virus. We feel the we of humanity as a whole. Number two, that in the end, the only effective political force that's worked is the nation. Let's have one nation and not a divided nation. And number three, we've seen the growth locally of community spirit like we've never had before. That's the we of community. I don't think any of these things are automatic. I think they will require determination, wisdom, and great courage. They will require leadership.
So here we have Rabbi Sachs bringing together all of our themes, and he focused exclusively on not being optimistic, but being hopeful, and he emphasized the hope being together. I want to close with the following last piece that I think is missing, and the truth is, this is something that we did not write about in the article, but as I was thinking about it post-article and preparing for this talk, the downside, potentially, if you don't think it through, of the classic argument, you give a long shear, there's one thing, being, that has not been mentioned once, and that is God, right? So where is God in all of this? And that's an important question, because if Rabbi Sachs, what he's doing, and it's important for him, to say that humans have agency, humans have to act, humans need to make the difference. So where's God? What are we relying on God for? The opposite of agency would be to say, Hashem will provide, Hashem will provide. But we have to account for the fact, if we want to promote agency, that where does God fit into this picture? And I think the answer is as follows, and I'm going to show you one more video, and then we'll close with one more text. This is not it.
Bishop Kuda Rabbanim, Lauren.
That's not the video. Hold on. Connecting together.
In Judaism, we believe we connect to God in three different ways: creation, revelation, redemption. So how do we connect to God through creation? I remember on one occasion when I was young and I was in Jerusalem for one of the first times at sunset, the setting sun turns those light brick walls of Jerusalem into burnished gold. And if you're standing on Mount Scopus, where the Hebrew University is, and you're looking out to the Judean hills, out towards the Dead Sea, it looks as if the whole landscape is on fire. goodness me, I felt God at that moment. But you can feel God in the blossoms on a spring day in Central Park. You can sense God in a snowflake. To see the beauty of creation, that is one way God speaks to us. Revelation, when we sit and learn Torah, especially when we sit and learn Torah together, and we are hearing God's word. And it may be that we're learning Torah, so we're looking at how Rashi refracted that word, the Ramban and Rashbam and Ibn Ezra. So we're hearing that several thousand-year-old conversation between heaven and earth that we call the written Torah and the Orient. And we become part of that conversation, recapturing that moment of revelation on Sinai. And then there's a third way, redemption. When I hear the cry of a child, or the cry of a person dying of hunger in Africa, I am hearing God calling to us to be his partner in the work of redemption. One that is much more active than in creation or revelation, but one where we really feel we are partners with God in making the world a little better. So I think those are the three primary ways in which we encounter God. It may be that not all of them come at the same period in our lives, but God is always there if we know where to look.
And I think this really brings all the pieces together. Where Rabbi Sachs, I believe his general worldview would be, is that while we need to promote human agency, it is through promoting human agency that we are actually reflecting God's values in this world. So that when we're talking about making the world a better place together, that hope, it's not that God is absent, it's that we are being infused with God's charge to do the act of redemption, to heal the fractured world, in Rabbi Sachs's words from his famous book. That itself is we are messengers of God, and that is how we bring God into the world. And to just show you how all of these pieces come together, we're going to close with the source it's not on the slides, but you have it in front of you. This is Lessons in Leadership, his book's essays on the Parsha related to leadership, which coincidentally is our theme this year during Shal Shuddas. We're talking about leadership. Rabbi Sachs is going to, and these are excerpted, so if you want to read it on your own, fill in the gaps. But he's going to tie in, and if you're not reading it carefully, you're not going to realize what he's doing. But he's going to tie in so many of our themes, and I think really connect it all and bring it all home together. So Rabbi Sachs says, for Judaism is God's call to human responsibility. From this call you can't hide, as Adam and Eve discovered when they tried, and you can't escape, as Jonah learned in the belly of a fish. That is the Torah's ethic of responsibility. No higher estimate has ever been given to the human condition. No higher vocation was ever entrusted to mortal creatures of flesh and blood. Judaism does not see human beings, as some religions do, as irretrievably corrupt, stained by original sin, incapable of good without God's grace. That is a form of faith, but it is not ours. Nor do we see religion as a matter of blind submission to God's will. That too is a form of faith, but not ours. We believe that we are God's image, free as he is free, creative as he is creative. We exist on an infinitely smaller and more limited scale, to be sure, but still we are the one point in all the echoing expanse of space where the universe becomes conscious of itself, the one life form capable of shaping its own destiny, choosing, therefore free, therefore responsible. Judaism is God's call to responsibility. So part one is agency, but it's God telling us to be agentic, which means, next paragraph, thou shalt not see thyself as a victim. Don't be passive. Do not believe, tying it into the beginning, as the Greeks did, that fate is blind and inexorable, that our fate once disclosed by the Delphic oracle has already been sealed before we were born, that like Laius and Oedipus, we are fated, however hard we try to escape the bonds of fate. That is a tragic view of the human condition. To some extent, It was shared in different ways by Spinoza, Marx, and Freud, the great triumvirate of Jews by descent who rejected Judaism and all its works. Instead, like Viktor Frankl, Survival of Auschwitz, and Aaron T. Beck, co-founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, we believe we are not defined by what happens to us, but rather by how we respond to what happens to us. That itself is determined by how we interpret what happens to us. If we change the way we think, which we can because of the plasticity of the brain, then we change the way we feel and the way we act. Fate is never final. There may be such a thing as an evil decree, but penitence, prayer, and charity can avert it. And what we cannot do alone, we can do together, for we believe it is not good for man to be alone. So Jews developed a morality of guilt in place of what the Greeks had, a morality of shame. A morality of guilt makes a sharp distinction between the person and the act, between the sinner and the sin. Because we are not wholly defined by what we do, there is a core within us that remains intact. My God, the soul you gave me is pure. So that whatever wrong we may have done, we can repent and be forgiven. That creates a language of hope, the only force strong enough to defeat a culture of despair. It is that power of hope, born whenever God's love and forgiveness gives rise to human freedom and responsibility, that has made Judaism the moral force it has always been to those whose minds and hearts are open. But that hope, says Moses, with a passion that still sears us whenever we tread it afresh, does not just happen. It has to be worked for and won. The only way to achieving it is not blaming God. He is not corrupt. The defect is in us, his children. If we seek a better world, we must make it. God teaches us, inspires us, forgives us when we fail, and lifts us when we fall, but we must make it. It is not what God does for us that transforms us. It is what we do for God. The deepest mystery of all is not our faith in God, but God's faith in us. May that faith sustain us as we heed the call to responsibility and take the risk of healing some of the needless wounds of an injured but still wondrous world. So here Rabbi Sachs takes all of our themes together. He talks about the importance of hope, the importance of cognitive flexibility, the importance of agency, the importance of together. And he says that that is what God wants us to do. God is charging us to take the responsibility and be his emissaries, and through that we are bringing God into the world, and we are connecting to God through the act of redemption, through the act of helping others, through the act of working together to make the world a better place. And as we commemorate the 5th year of Rabbi Sachs' Yurtzeit, I will charge all of you, because this has to happen. If we want to make the world a better place, we need to come together. We need to take agency. We need to take responsibility, and that requires us to all make a difference, to all come together to brainstorm. How can we improve our lives? How can we improve our community? How can we improve Israel? How can we improve the Jewish community? How can we improve the world on a larger scale? Rabbi Sachs would charge us to make sure that even though he's not here, that we take his legacy to be able to take his ideas, take his thoughts, and really not just think about them, but have a difference, make a difference in the world, heal that fractured world by bringing God into the act of redemption. Thank you all. We now have a second shiur, so don't go anywhere. It's going to be right here with Shuli Mishkin. And if anybody has any, we're going to bench. If anybody has any questions or comments or reflections, let me know afterwards. We're not going to do that now. Chaim, take it away.